Hi, good morning, everybody.
Yeah. Hopefully, everyone can have some pretty good takeaways from today's webinar.
So today we're going to be looking at Autodesk Design Checker, specifically the application. So Alex has been kind of using this thing with a couple different services engagements that you had. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Grayson. It's actually been a while since I've been on one of these AVAs, but I'm on the consulting side. So some of you might have worked with me on some of the services engagements that we have here at KETIV, but I'm going to be your host today, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this whole experience.
Awesome. Yeah, and one thing too that we always want to point out too as well is that make sure you guys ask questions. I know that Design Checker especially is it is maybe a tool that you guys aren't as familiar with. I know every time I bring it up to a customer, they just I just see blank stares all the time. So again, if this is something that's completely new to you guys and you guys want to see a little bit more of this tool, like I said, just feel free to let us know in the questions. We also have surveys at the end, so if there's a specific topic that you guys want to see, of course, we're feel more than welcome to add that topic to the. So with that, I'll go ahead and take it over from here. So like Grayson mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Autodesk Design Checker app. Now, the biggest thing that I want you guys to take away from today's presentation is going to be how can we standardize our design workflows, right? So again, a little bit about myself. My name is Alvarez. I'm an application engineer here at KETIV. I've been in this role for 4 to 5 years now, 4.5 to 5 years now, and one of my roles, or part of my role, is to talk to customers, engage with them, really understand their design workflows. Are there any deficiencies with maybe some of the ways that they're going about things? I'm focused a little bit more on the manufacturing side. So again, I have a broad range of unique roles here at the company, and one of the things that I often come across is customers looking to automate maybe their design and manufacturing workflows, or maybe they're working on a specific project that's completely new to them and they need a little bit of guidance with. So one of the first things that we do here as a consultant is going to be to look at your assemblies. How are you guys designing your parts? How are you guys transitioning over to manufacturing? And believe it or not, when we start dissecting some of these assemblies and some of these models, the first thing that we see is just an inconsistent design standard, right? So one person is designing a part one way, they're putting it together in a certain fashion, and this could all be within the same division. Now, obviously, once you start expanding and kind of growing outside of the divisions, that's where things start getting a little bit more complicated as well. But point being is that there's no standards, no design standards within the company. Now, that can be working at the moment, right? So that can be completely fine. You guys are probably getting the workout, and it's working, as of right now. But again, if you guys start taking the next step and start really thinking about automation, or maybe even some of the more complicated projects, that's where you're going to start running into some roadblocks, right? So again, today's learning objective, the biggest takeaway that I want you guys to leave with today is how can we use this tool to standardize our design workflows. So the first thing that I want to point out is that this tool is not through the Manage portal, right? So if you guys are a longtime Autodesk customer, you guys are definitely going to be familiar with the Autodesk.manage portal, or even the desktop application. You're not going to see the Design Checker application on there, right? So that's the first thing that I want to point out. There is a specific Autodesk App Store, very similar to to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store if you guys are on Android. It works the same exact way. Now, what the Autodesk App Store has is really hundreds of plugins that are uniquely built by the Autodesk community, right? So if you guys have ever been using Inventor and you guys, maybe a thought came across and you're like, oh, I really wish Inventor was able to do this, right? Or I really wish that I was able to streamline this process. Chances are, if you look in the Autodesk App Store, you're gonna find something related to that topic, right? And obviously, if you don't, you can always go to the Autodesk forum and start, typing in some of the information there. But again, first thing I always recommend customers is look through the Autodesk App Store and see if there's anything in there that you guys can leverage. And now the kinds of tools that you'll see in the App Store, they really range from design all the way to manufacturing, right? So there's tools obviously like the Design Checker, meant to kind of standardize some of the design workflows. You have feature recognition applications as well. You have the benchmark tool if maybe your workstation is not performing to its max capabilities. You can really see where some of the, like I said, some of the deficiencies are with the with that benchmark tool application. So these are just some of the examples that you'll find in the App Store. We'll go ahead and do a deep dive here in just a bit, but just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys just a quick overview of some of the tools that you guys can find inside of the Autodesk App Store there. Okay, so like we mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the Design Checker. Now, the biggest, I guess, feature that we're going to leverage inside of the Design Checker is going to be to leverage the design profiles that are built into the Design Checker. So again, we'll talk a little bit about profiles and kind of how they play a pretty big role inside of this tool. But the biggest reason that these or what these profiles allow the designer or the engineer to do is it gives them insight as to whether or not they're adhering to the company standards, right? Or to the customer standards. Maybe a customer has a specific design rule that you guys have to adhere by. That's something that you can implement into Design Checker. And if you guys have, new engineers or new designers, maybe you guys have a kind of a different divisions, a mixture of divisions. That's something that you can start implementing into the tool, create the profile, right? Because there is some decent out of the box functionality that you can use with Design Checker. Create that profile to make sure that the users adhere to a specific standard, and then have it running in the background so that the engineer can in real time see whether his designs meet those standards or not. Right. So it's a really neat tool. Like I said, there's a lot of customization that's built that you can actually build into the Design Checker app. It does have a connection with iLogic. So if you guys are using iLogic at the moment, this is again just another huge benefit to those users as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump into the software real quick. Do a quick demonstration of the tool, kind of show you guys how to install it, and then that way you guys can test it out on your own time. So the first thing that I like to do here is so notice that I do have it installed already. Right, so that's going to be the first thing that you guys will see once you install the tool, is that it's going to show up here as its own unique tab. Right, so the way that I got this to show up is that you're going to want to go to the Tools tab, and you don't have to go through this route that I'm showing you. There's obviously various different ways, but I find that this is probably one of the fastest ways to kind of go about it. Right, so we're going to launch this Autodesk App Manager. This kind of shows you a list of applications here that you have currently running. But the reason why I selected this route is because we have this little link, hyperlink at the very bottom, right? So launch the Autodesk App Store website. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that, and it's going to take me directly to that Autodesk App Store, right? Now, the nice thing about this is that being that we came from Inventor, it automatically set us to the Inventor tab, right? Or to the Inventor drop down there. Now, there's tools. If you guys are using AutoCAD, there's applications for AutoCAD. If you guys are using Fusion, there's applications for Fusion. So there's many different applications here that are going to be able to suit your guys' current needs. Right. So for Inventor, again, we have a decent amount of different applications here that we can choose from. Notice that right now we're mostly just looking at the featured apps, right, or the most popular apps. You can go ahead and click on Show All. And there's going to be about 25 different pages worth of content here, right? So again, tons of applications. Like I said, I always recommend if there's something that you guys are looking for within the software, just go ahead and take a look at the Autodesk App Store, and chances are you might find something closely related to what you guys are looking for. So one of the things here, right? So the Easy Stairs, I know I've used this one in the past. This is a pretty handy tool. Another one that I mentioned, feature recognition, right? So if you're working with 3D vendors or vendors and they're sending you step files, and maybe you want to extract some of the features, right? Maybe you want to make a quick modification or you want to do a quick edit, you can extract some of the features that are within those files, right? And then obviously for the one for today, we're going to be working with Design Checker. Now to install it, you do have to make sure that you have a Autodesk credentials first, right? So being that Autodesk is moving to the subscription method now, so that shouldn't really be an issue to anyone. But you have to make sure that you have your Autodesk credentials, right? And then once you do that, you log in, and then you're now able to download it. One thing that I do want to point out is that this tool obviously is only available for Windows, right? Language is only going to be English. Now, the nice thing that I always like to point out about this tool is that it actually tells you some of the updated bug fixes, right? So this is a live application. This isn't something that someone created, 6-7 years ago, and they just left it. They just left it kind of do its own thing. This is something that Autodesk is actually investing time in. They're getting feedback from this tool, and they're actually fixing some of the bugs that come up with the tool. So again, the latest version here is able to support Inventor 2021. And so if you guys are running Inventor 2021, that's something that you guys can currently use here with the software. So again, once you download it, very, very simple. You just launch Inventor back up again. And like I said, you're going to get the Design Checker tab here at the very end. Now, what I like about this too is that you don't get overwhelmed with a lot of options, right? So again, one of the things about applications is that sometimes they just tend to overwhelm you with different options. Here you only have a few options. Now, once you start configuring the profiles, that's really where the meat and potatoes is for the application here. But when you just start off, you don't really get many selections here. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is going to be this options, right? So we're going to go to the options, and it's asking you where that profile group is currently located, right? So if you kind of take a look at this is actually going to be an XML, right? So based off of some of the selections that you do for your configure profiles, it's going to save that file as an XML, and you can always reference that profile group, right? So again, you can have 10, you can have 15, 20 different profile groups, depending on the kind of product, depending on the kind of design workflows that you guys are wanting to implement, depending on the customer, right? It may be a customer A has different standards than customer B. You can really start leveraging this and start creating these different profiles. And then that way, again, you guys are making sure that you guys are adhering to those different standards. So that's the first thing that I want to point out, right? So by default, it's always going to be located in this location. You guys can change the location. So if you guys want to set this up in a shared network drive, that is absolutely possible. Right now, the other thing here is going to be enable live check. This is more to allow the tool to run kind of in the background. Right? So one thing that I always say is just go ahead and turn it on. You can always turn this off down the road. Right, so if you guys are designing a pretty large assembly and you guys are finding yourselves that the workstation is maybe lagging a little bit or it's slowing down, go ahead and turn that off, right? And then that's going to prevent that from running kind of in the background. And then you can always run it manually once you guys are ready to to transition over to the next step. So that's going to be the first thing, right? Is just taking a look at your options and then taking a look at the profile, making sure that it's set up in the correct location. Now, a common question I get is, well, how do we start configuring our profiles, right? And that's going to be this next option here. But let me go ahead and just open up. Yeah, actually, let's go ahead and take a look at the configure profiles real quick, just to show you guys kind of what that looks like. Now, in today's demonstration, we're just going to be doing it on a part, right? But again, you can apply you can apply the design checker on drawings. You can apply it on assemblies, and you can even apply it on some of the iProperties. Right, so let's go ahead and take a look. So the workflow that we're going to talk about today, like I said, is going to be pertaining to parts. So when you click on the default part, it's going to show you a list of options that you can check for. Right. So I've worked with various customers where once they transition over to manufacturing or they send the part over to manufacturing, they have to make sure that that design doesn't have any suppressed features. That is one of the items here that we can check on. Any buried features, right? If you guys aren't familiar with some of the terminology here, no problem, just hover over it and it tells you exactly what this flag is going to be checking for. Right, so adaptive features, it's a great functionality, but maybe once you actually solidified your design, you don't want this to change. right? You can always check for adaptive features and make sure that you don't have any of those adaptive features in your model. Now, probably some of the, or one of the most important ones here that I always like to point out as well is going to be this under constrained sketches, right? So again, if you guys have been designing for some time now, you'll know that under constrained sketches is usually going to be a big no-no. So that's one of the things that I'm going to go ahead and check. Right, you have additional functionality here, holes, not hole features. If you have empty sketches, I'm going to go ahead and turn on unused sketches, right? Just kind of the whole 9 yards here. Adaptive sketches as well is something that you can check. Now, this is the out-of-the-box functionality, right? So this is what Design Checker comes with. But if you guys go over to the next tab, this is where some of the customization starts taking into effect. All right, so like I said, now you can start involving iLogic. So if you guys, like I said, are pretty good with iLogic, or you guys have some of the rules right now, right? So there are companies that are using iLogic to do kind of some error checking in their designs. Go ahead and use Design Checker to kind of take that to the next level, right? So you can use iLogic kind of in parallel here with the tool, and then like I said, it's going to give you just that much more functionality. So we'll actually do a quick example here, but again, just know that this is out of the box essentially flags here that we can look for, and then the next tab over is going to be some of the more custom rules that we can implement. Now, probably one of the features that I like the most here is going to be this machining tab. Right, so like I said, I'm primary role here is going to be on manufacturing, so I'm always looking, for ways to kind of streamline that manufacturing workflow or the design of manufacturing workflow. So one of the biggest things that I find is that when a new designer, new engineer is starting to kind of work its way through the company, they'll start creating these designs, but they're not always going to be manufacturable, right? So, and that's granted, right? Because they're brand new. Maybe they don't understand the CNC machine or they don't understand the CNC machine capabilities. Whatever the case may be, this is something that you guys can, again, start leveraging, right? Maybe there's a minimum hole diameter that your part has to adhere by. Maximum hole diameter, right? Maybe you guys only have a select number of tools. Whatever the case may be, this is something that you guys can kind of start including with that process as well, right? You want to check diameter units, the maximum depth diameter ratio, right? So right now it's set 5:1. So if that ratio is ever more than the 5:1, right? So again, once you have once you surpass the ratio, then that's where you start running into issues with the hole accuracy. You can go ahead and also check for that as well, right? So a lot of functionality here that's built in. Again, this is the out of the box portion. If you guys are doing some more custom work, or you guys want to see additional functionality, that's something that you guys can leverage this custom tab for.
So Alex, we had a question come in from Charles, and he
Yep.
was asking if there's any way to apply exceptions. So for instance, if you mainly wanted to ignore empty sketches, but there might be a condition where you would not want to ignore, is there a way to have if-then statements applied to something like that?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Yeah, so you can, like I said, you can get as custom as you want with your iLogic rules. I'll show here in just a bit. The nice thing about Design Checker is obviously not only that it flags out all of these issues, but you can mark certain issues as an exception, right? So if and I'll show this example here in just a bit, but you can actually create a report. So at the end of the design, if you guys want to generate a report, kind of get a high level overview of what failed, what didn't fail, it's going to be able to do that. Now, again, if you mark something as an exception within the tool, it's no longer going to present that as an issue. Now that's a great question, right? Because everything that you're seeing here, the software is going to flag, but it's not. It doesn't mean that the design is bad, right? It doesn't mean that you can't export your designs out, or it doesn't mean that you can go to manufacturing. All it's doing right here is it's flagging the engineer or the designer in real time, right? So it's not going to prevent you from saving. It's not going to do some crazy things like that. It's just going to flag the user and let them know that, hey, this is an issue that we picked up. You might want to take a double look at it. And so then the last tab is going to be the groups tab. We'll see here. This will probably start making a little bit more sense in just a bit. But depending on the some of the features that you have here turned on, that's what's going to be showing inside of these folders, right? So we have the machining folder. So it does a pretty good job here of organizing the different flags that we have enabled. You can color code specific flags, right? So if something's passed, you can color code that little check mark, indicating to you that, hey, that's something that we're okay with, right? Again, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it. I think this is good out of the box, but everyone has their own unique coloring standards. And like I said, we can go through all of these, right? But for the most part, for today, we're just going to be focusing on this default part. But if you guys take a look at the default drawing, you guys have certain flags here that you guys can look for, right? So standard arrowheads, standard precision. Again, you can customize this, and then you can create your own individual check groups there as well. Same thing goes for assemblies. Right. And then the last one here that we'll take a look at is the default properties. Right. This is, again, another common issue that I see is that either the engineer or the designer doesn't fill out a specific property correctly. This is something that you can add, right? And probably the best thing about this too is that you can set a specific property as default. So when you run this tool, it's automatically going to run that default property. Right now,
hey Alex, you want to go back to that assemblies area?
Yeah.
There's something that's kind of cool. The required checks on parts. So there's an option there that compares check time versus file save time. That might be extremely useful if you want to narrow down just like as far as performance gains, or just taking a look at like, what am I actually going to look at in assembly? That's actually a pretty interesting one to use.
Yeah, no, and that's something, like I said, if you can provide exceptions for this as well. So I know that was one of the questions that got brought up. So you can, if this doesn't really satisfy what you're looking for, go ahead and customize that even further, and then now you have more control of kind of what it's looking for and what it can omit. And then the default properties here, as I was mentioning, right? You can set default properties for any of the parts. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I'll set a default property, but it's not going to apply to the other parts, right? Or I just have a product line that has a set default property. Well, that's where your new profiles come into play, right? So what I can do is I can right click on that and say, this is going to be product line 1001. I'm going to say okay. And now I have properties set, or I have a profile group set for product line 1001, right? And I can go ahead and add some information, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add required properties. I can take a look at the projects. I can either add all of them or only add a select few, right? So I have to make sure that the description is always going to be there. Maybe the rev number, designer, engineer, right? And then I'm going to go and press OK. And then this is what it's going to show up, right? So it's going to tell you whether it's going to be required or not. You can set a max character length as well, right? So if you want the description to be in all caps, that's something that you can check for as well. And then you can set a specific property to be default, right? So you can go ahead and just type in whatever that property is going to be. So again, a lot of functionality, a lot of kind of neat little tools in here. And again, it would take longer than an hour to kind of go through each and every single one of these features. So let me just go ahead and do a quick example here of the part, just so we can see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this profile. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to, inside of this default properties, I'm going to go ahead and add part number, description, and we'll go with engineer here as well. Right? And maybe you guys want to see the vendor as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And let's go ahead and save it. Right? So we'll save this out. We can close out this design checker profile. And now I can go ahead and proceed with opening up a part. Now, the first thing you'll see is that you get these little gauges at the bottom, right? So you get these little gauges by default. I think it for some reason, it always starts off like this. So when you first install the tool, it's going to be kind of up in your face up here on the top left. You can always grab them and then just drag them down. You can turn these off, right? So this is kind of where the live check-in comes into play. You can always turn this off if you don't want to see the gauges. And then obviously you can turn off the add-in if you don't want to run it during a specific part. But that's the first thing that you'll see. Now, the other thing that you guys kind of want to see here is going to be the design checker browser. Right? So very similar to your model browser, to your iLogic browser. again, it doesn't come up by default, but if you guys want to go ahead and turn that on, go to the View tab, user interface, and then turn on the Design Checker results. And this is what it looks like, right? So again, you can dock this wherever you like. Now, the thing that I want to point out here to you guys is that, let's go ahead and take a look at these gauges first. This is, again, a real time, right? So in real time, it's actually telling you what's failing and what isn't. Now, our goal should be to make sure that these gauges are always going to be green. Right? Now, again, it's not always going to be the case. There's probably going to be a few features in here that we're going to be okay with, but that's, again, going to be up to the designer or engineer to make that call. So again, it's telling us that the machining folder has a few issues, and then the modeling folder has a few issues as well. So what we do is we take a look at these folders, right? And it tells you what's passed, and it's telling you here what's failing at the moment. So if we take a look at the machining folder, it's telling us that there's an invalid hole increment, right? Well, that's interesting. If I take a look at this invalid hole increment, I can actually right click on this error, say edit, and it'll bring up the actual command for us, right? So we don't have to, especially if you have a pretty complicated part, you don't have to go in here and search for that feature. Now, if you take a look at it, it's telling us that this hole, the hole right now, or this counter bore, is going to be 0.134, right, or the through hole. If you take a look at your configured profiles, you guys can kind of see why, right? So we'll go into the machining tab, and it's telling you that the hole size increments are going to be 1/8 of an inch. Right now, again, that might not be feasible. It might be. I was talking to a customer a couple of days ago that they actually do have hole increments, right? Specific hole increments, and it really just depends on their product line. So same exact thing that I did with the properties, you can have a specific profile set for the parts, right? So you can just right click, select new profile, and maybe there's only one specific product line that has these hole size increments, right? That's something that you can go ahead and flag down, or maybe you guys aren't even using that, right? You guys can always just uncheck that and then just call it a day. But again, this is just a nice, kind of a nice feature here to have. Now, what I was talking about, let's actually take a look at some of the modeling ones, and we'll come back to this hole increment. So if we take a look at some of the modeling issues, we'll see that the feature is not a hole. Right? We'll see that we have some unconstrained sketches, and then we have some unused sketches. Right, so again, now we can quickly go in here and see exactly what's going on. So I'll take a look at sketch 4. What I can do is I can right click on it. I know it's empty sketch. It doesn't look like it's doing anything to affect the part, right? So you can either delete it, you can suppress it, you know, whatever kind of gets the job done there. If I take a look at this fully constrained sketch fail, right? So again, it's telling me that it failed the fully constrained sketches. I can now go in here into sketch 1 and make sure that it's actually failing, right? Or it's not fully constrained. And sure enough, we'll see that it's not fully constrained, right? And so now the engineer, the designer gets flagged. Now, you know, he's able to realize, or they're able to realize that, hey, this design can actually move around if I update it, right? So I have to make sure that I add another dimension to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that I add my angular dimension. It's now fully constrained. I'm gonna go ahead and say finish sketch. And again, in real time, right, we don't have to do a recheck or re-execute. It's automatically going to figure that out for us. Okay, now the last little thing here that I wanted to talk about is, so, you know, there was a good question here. Well, what happens if we want to omit a specific feature, right? Well, if you take a look at this one, this feature was created just by using a regular extrusion, right? So again, the software kind of sees it as a whole. The user created it as a extrusion feature. We're okay with that, right? This isn't a big deal because we're not going to use some sort of a hole call out for that. So what I can do is I can right click, acknowledge fail. It does require some sort of comment, right? So if you guys do acknowledge the fail, you have to make sure that you enter a comment, right? So I'm going to say, oh, okay.
So Alex,
yeah,
just out of curiosity, for those comments, is this something you could like export maybe to hand off to your, you know, your manager or something, just so they know that you went through this process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can create a report of this, and it actually does point out. So the acknowledge fails. It points out who did the acknowledgement, and then it actually holds you accountable, right? So it shows the actual comment. So that's why it requires a comment, because again, it's trying to make sure that it lets the rest of the users know that a specific person made that acknowledgement.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so same thing with this one, right? So I'm okay with these holes. I'm probably gonna bore them out, or I'm gonna use an end mill, even though I don't have that size diameter tool. So what I'm gonna do is I'm once again acknowledge fail. Okay. Right. Just say okay to that. And now you see, again, once we acknowledge these fails, we have these green check marks, or these green gauges. So that means that we're good to go. So the last thing here that I'll talk about before we kind of wrap things up is generating your reports, right? So again, we can go ahead and generate reports. Before I do that, let me go ahead and just talk a little bit about some of the I properties here that we had talked about as well, right? So if you take a look at your I properties currently, right? So you have the designer, you have the engineer here as well. You'll notice that it didn't bring up an error for these issues, right? Or for some of these empty I properties. So let's go ahead and take a look at the configured profiles once again. Now, this is one thing that I want to make sure that I point out to you guys, is that even though you're designing kind of in the middle of, you're actually in the middle of your design, you can always go back and modify your profiles if you wanted to, right? So what I mean by that is we can go into the configure profiles. We'll take a look at our default properties. We'll see that they're checked on, right? And they're required. But if you go to your parts, you'll see that you have your I properties unchecked here, right? So what it's asking you to do is go ahead and check the I properties, default properties, right? So this is a profile. If we had multiple profiles for the properties, this is something that you can select from, right, in the dropdown. And these are the properties that we have for the default properties, right? So we're gonna go ahead and save this out and then close it. But you're probably asking yourself, well, we just acknowledged some of the errors, right? So what if we acknowledge 10 errors? Are we going to have to redo that once again? You don't, right? So you can either re-execute the configured profiles up here, or you can re-execute, rerun all checks here at the bottom. Right, we get this dialog box. You want to reset the acknowledged fails, right? So are you sure you want to rerun all checks? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Now, if you wanted to reset the acknowledged fails, this is where you would check that box on, right? So for us, we're just gonna go ahead and say yes. And notice that it doesn't show me any of the machining issues, right? So the kind of some of the whole issues. It just shows me a modeling issue, and it shows me that my required I properties have not been filled out. So again, this is something I kind of want to emphasize. This is something that you guys can definitely do at the moment with iLogic. Right, so this is real-time error checking that you guys can do with iLogic. But again, this tool kind of already does it for you without really, getting too custom. So I always recommend just start off with something like this. If you guys do need more customization, or you guys need a little bit more flexibility with the error checking, go ahead and and either start adding some of the iLogic rules, or you can even reach out to us and we can kind of provide some guidance on that. So the last thing here that I want to point out is how do we go about customizing this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just do one last check here for my configured profiles. I'm going to go into the custom tab, right? So this tab here is what's controlling which rule is going to be active, right? So which iLogic rule is going to run when I run a specific profile. So I'm going to go ahead and just say new row, iLogic rule. I'm going to go ahead and browse for it. For me, I'm always a kind of a fan of these external iLogic rules, right? So I always have a folder set up for them. I'm going to go ahead and run this fillet size iLogic UB rule, right? And the trigger to run this iLogic rule can be any one of these different triggers, right? So if you guys have used iLogic, you guys are familiar with triggers. This is essentially telling the software which command is going to automatically fire this rule to run, right? So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make this any feature change be my trigger. Now you want to be careful here, because if you have this any feature change, again, you have to keep in mind any feature that you modify it's going to automatically try to run that rule. Right. So again, this can be a kind of a positive or a negative thing, kind of depending on the complexity of your part here. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And we've now added that custom rule. There's a little bit more work that you have to do. You have to make sure that you go to your groups, and you'll see that you have your unassigned flags here kind of labeled out for you. And now it's going to be up to you, right? Do you want this in the machining folder? Do you want this in the modeling folder? This is completely up to you guys, right? For me, I kind of like to keep things a little bit organized. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a custom folder for myself. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag this fillet size flag to the custom folder. Right, and so there it is. So now the last step for me is going to be to save this out. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and just add a fillet. And actually, before I do that, let me go ahead and show you what the rule looks like. Essentially, what this rule is doing is it's looking for a fillet. And if that fillet is less than 1/8 of an inch, it's going to flag me down and say that it's too small. Right. So that's, again, just the iLogic rule that I'm going with. If you guys want this rule, or if you guys would like to kind of dissect it a little bit, just let me know, and we'll make sure to send that over to you guys as well. So I'll go ahead and add a fillet, and we'll say that this fillet is going to be 5 thousandths. Select that bottom. Right, so it creates the fillet. Again, this is something that's completely acceptable, right? So this is a 5 thousandths fillet. Again, if you have a bullnose end mill, this is something that can definitely be machined. But again, maybe we're making a mold and we're trying to stay away from a specific fillet size, right? Due to some of the testing that we've done, whatever the case may be. That's something that, again, you guys can fully customize. But again, the thing that I want to point out here is we're going to rerun this check. We're not going to reset the acknowledged fails. And then up here, we'll see that we get this custom folder now. We now have 3 gauges, right? Because there's 3 groups that we're checking. And we'll see that there's this general error. And now there's this fillet size flag that's saying 5 thousandths is too small. Right. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys, right? So there's a lot of power that's right out of the box with this tool, but you can really customize this to really no extent. So however custom you want to get is the amount of customization that you can add to this tool. And that's why I wanted to do kind of this quick presentation on it, just to make sure that you guys are aware of the tool. Know that it's free, right? This is something that I didn't pay for. It's something that it's already included with your Autodesk subscription. So again, I wanted to make sure that everyone was kind of aware of how this tool worked and how you can really leverage this this application. So I'm going to jump back into the presentation here. And so again, just to do a quick recap of the presentation, showed you guys how the Design Checker application tool was installed. And this is a free application. This is something that you guys don't have to pay for. Showed you some of the out of the box capabilities, and then showed you a little bit of customization with the tool as well. Again, if you're trying to see how custom you can get, or if there's a specific feature that you're trying to add to this tool, feel free to reach out, right? I'll have my contact info here at the end. Like I said, I've used this tool for quite some time, so I'm a firm believer that it can definitely help some of the roadblocks that you guys might be having with some of the standardization.
And then I think we're seeing a few questions coming through here at the end. So I'm going to start working through these. We've got a couple by Jeff. So one of which he was asking was mainly around the gauges. Can you turn those on and off? Can you have certain ones on versus other ones being on? Is there any really way to control that?
There is actually, yeah. So you can control if you go back to what I was talking about, the enable live check. That's essentially what turns the gauges on or off. So yeah, I'm definitely there, right? If the gauges are kind of there in my design workspace, I kind of find that sometimes annoying. So yeah, you can turn off live check, and then it's going to turn off the gauges. Now, if you want to turn on a specific gauge on or off, that's going to be a little bit more complicated. I don't think we have that functionality built into the tool. What you can always do is you can turn off or you can remove a specific profile right? So if you guys remember, I did a custom profile for the properties or for the fillet size. You can remove that profile until you're ready to check it, and then it's going to give you guys the same result, right? It's not going to show that gauge, but if you guys are ready to run that check, you can add that profile or that folder, and then it's going to give you the ability to run that the custom rules.
Okay. And then he also had another question about being able to search through all parts in assembly. I know that we only reviewed the part portion of the design checker. From what I saw, most of that would be handled through the assembly. So if I wanted to drill down into individual components inside of an assembly, that would be done through the assembly side of the part checker.
Through the assembly side, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then Brian was asking if there's any, or where was the customization data stored? I think that was through the profile, correct?
It is going to be through the profiles, yeah. So you can, like I said, the customization or the custom role that I created was is located in a in a shared location. So the reason why I pointed that out is because a lot of customers currently are using iLogic, right? And they are leveraging the kind of the iLogic portion of things to do some error checking on their own. And chances are they usually have an external rule that's located in the shell location. That way everyone has access to it. So that's the way that I did it, just to make sure that I'm able to kind of relate to some of the customers that are currently using iLogic. But yeah, you can have a local folder, in your workstation, or you can have a folder that has all of the custom rules in a shared location.
Yeah, a few more coming in. We got a licensing question here. So is this available for people who have not transferred to subscription? So essentially they're still on maintenance.
It should be, and I think I misspoke there when I was talking about the Autodesk subscription. As long as you have an Autodesk profile, you should be able to download this application. Yeah. So if you guys have if you guys have an Autodesk profile, which again, if you guys aren't on the subscription method, maybe you guys don't have a profile yet, but I think regardless of that, it's free to create a Autodesk profile. So if you guys don't have one, just try creating one, and then it should allow you to download the desktop app.
Okay, so it's not necessarily tied to like having a subscription account to like Product Design Suite.
Yeah, it's not tied to that.
Okay, that's good information. Michael, I think we will have the link being sent out as a follow-up specifically for the Autodesk apps. I know it's not through the Manage portal, right?
It's not. Yeah, no, it's through the actual the actual Autodesk application store. Yeah, so yeah, that's one thing that I want to make sure that I emphasize. It's not through the manage.autodesk.com portal or through even your desktop application, right? Because I know Autodesk has a actual desktop app. It has to be through this apps.autodesk.com website. So I'll actually add this to the chat real quick, just to make sure everyone has it.
Cool. And I know that you've mentioned a couple of times that you've used this with customers. What are some of the more interesting ways that you've seen it used? I've seen it on the machining side, especially when you're doing like 3D annotations and stuff. It's pretty cool. But have you seen anything else outside of that?
Yeah, so we were actually working with a customer probably a couple of weeks ago, and one of the ways that they were using it is, and again, without going too much into detail, their assembly required a specific component to always be in that assembly, right? So it was they were working with doors. That door, I think, had to be a double pane window or double panel window. And again, that's something that they were mentioning that it's 10 or 15 people that were touching this assembly, right? So many different people. This is something that can obviously get overlooked relatively easy. So what we did is we actually created a custom rule, right? And based off of a specific part that had to be in that assembly, so you can get pretty customizable, like I said, we allowed the user to select a specific part that they had to make sure that they had in the assembly. We ran that inside of the design checker, and then it automatically checks whether that part was in that assembly or not, right? And this is a pretty large assembly with 500 components, so it's something that can easily be overlooked. And again, with design checker, we were able to make sure that component was always there. So that's probably one of the most neat ways that I've seen Design Checker be used.
Oh, got another question coming in from James. He's asking if there's a way you can check on all features of a certain type and not just one. So that sounds like maybe more on the customization side.
Yeah. So what I was showing was just on fillet features, right? You can check. Yeah, you can get pretty fancy with it. You can check extrusions. I think for mine, I was only checking a specific fillet name. As long as you're comfortable with iLogic and you guys are familiar with how it works, you can check all fillet features. You can check all extrusions. Yeah, you can get pretty fancy with it. Granted that, obviously your iLogic has to be pretty spot on there as well.
Yeah, I could see that. And for anybody, if you don't really have any experience with iLogic, we've got we have probably 30 videos just around iLogic and different ways to implement that. I really recommend checking those out. It's an awesome part of the Inventor, kind of the ecosystem, the workflow that you can kind of get into there. It's pretty powerful stuff that you can see how it will expand even into, say, like applications such as this one. All right, I think that's it for the questions coming in. I wasn't sure, Alex, if there's anything else that you really kind of wanted to mention on this.
No, I think that was going to be it. That was going to be it on my end as well. Again, before I still share my screen, actually, I just wanted to share my contact info with everyone once again. Yeah, so again, here's my contact info, guys. If you guys have any questions on the tool, or like I said, I do both manufacturing and design. So if you guys have any questions on PowerMill, FeatureCam, Inventor, Inventor Cam, Fusion 360, I'm all about those tools. So feel free to reach out. Like I said, if you guys want to talk further about this Design Checker app, again, just ping me and we can set up a Zoom call and we can kind of talk about some of the workflows that we can incorporate with your guys' design workflows. Cool.
Actually, we have one more coming in from a familiar face, Andrew Burnett. He was asking if there's if there's any best practice around, say, using external rules or internal rules with the templates. So you know how sometimes on iLogic you can have a iLogic rule saved off into a shared location so everybody in the company can access that. Do you think that would pair well with having, say, a network shared profile?
Yeah, no, that shouldn't be an issue at all. Like I said, we can always test that out though. So if there's any issues with that, like I said, I've been using external rules. I've actually done it with some of my colleagues here through a network location as well. So that's never been an issue up to this point. But again, if whatever they're trying to do, if they're coming up with errors or something isn't working quite right, just ping us and then we can go ahead and see, kind of diagnose what's going on. But yeah, in terms of best practices, it really depends on what you guys are currently doing, right? So it sounds like you guys have a shared location for some of these external rules. So what I would do is just make sure that you keep those as they are, and then just point the profiles to that correct location.
Cool, good information.
Awesome. Okay, so I think was that it on the questions, Grayson?
Yep, that is it on the question. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's AVA. It was appreciated. Thank you, Alex, for running through this. I mean, even from my side, I learned quite a bit on that tool. It's
awesome.
Pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.